How are you all? Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. I'm going to just spend just about 2 minutes talking a little bit about the anthology to come. And this is Plume Poetry 8. If you can see this, our previous issue, our volume rather. And the next one we had hoped for an April 1st or 2nd release, but there are some problems apparently in the publishing industry with supply chains and paper and that sort of thing. So I expect now it will be mid-May, which I think is not a bad thing with all the things coming out in Poetry Month in April. Maybe a little delay is to our benefit and we'll get more readers as well. But let me just talk about the nature of the next anthology, of which Diane Seuss is the featured poet. Thank you, Diane. And I wrote a little introduction, and maybe it's best if I just read just a bit of that. So the design will remain the same. In the past, we've had about 90 poets, most of which I would say were fairly well known and had substantial reputations, and some not so much. But I was not altogether satisfied of late with how things were going. So you'll again find in the new volume some familiar names. We've cut down the established poet, if I can say that, the established poets list to 45. So there'll be definitely some names that are familiar to you, and you'll be glad to meet again and see what they've been up to over the course of the years. But now in the volume coming up, a change. And I suppose I didn't want to any longer be the sole gatekeeper, which as an editor I had become over the years again. And I chose or solicited the poets, or they submitted work, and it was my obligation to select the poets who would be represented in the volume. But for reasons that I have come to far too late, I'm sure, it seemed to me that the poetry we were and the poets we were inviting were, it was a less diverse crowd, certainly, than I wanted. And the poetry world has become, as you know, so populous, it's beyond truly any one person's ability to kind of reasonably govern in some way, that you can talk about the government of the state of poetry, at least in this contingent sort of way, and however temporary the office might be. So what to do? In effect, my answer has been to, again, enlist 45, but I think maybe it's actually 49 guest editors who will offer a poem of their own. So perhaps Ray Armantrout or Stuart Diebeck or someone will offer a poem of their own. And then they will select a poet who they feel is less appreciated than he, she, or they might be, who receives less of the spotlight. And we all know that poetry is often a matter of serendipity and who you happen to be seated next to at the theater, and you make a connection, and there you go. Certainly it's a meritocracy in many ways as well. But these poets will select a poet to partner with. They will introduce the poet and the poem, and then we will publish the poet they have selected in a little diorama, I suppose, or at least in couplets, and there'll be 45 pairs of poets. And to my delight, and sort of what I expected, the poets that each poet chose, we ended up with a much more varied voiced volume, if I can use those 3 V's. It's really been a delight for me to see. And I think all the feedback that I've received from all of the poets has been positive, and I expect that will be the way that we will move forward in the future as well. I think both sides are pleased. The established poets are pleased to present someone that they've adored and offer him or her to the public. And I think the selected poets have been grateful and appreciative to receive some attention that they have long merited. So it's been a good thing, I think, on both sides. And I think the reader will profit by it all as well. And I'll just have it aside for this evening's reading. We've been presenting these Plume readings as partnered pairs. But Diane is, again, our featured poet. And it came to us as an aside, I should tell you, that we had gone to the publisher just before we kind of figured all of this out. And James, therefore, will not appear, as he certainly merits, in the Plume Poetry 9. But James, I expect that your name and poem will appear in Plume Poetry 10. But it's still a nice pairing, I think, with Diane and James's work. So I'm really pleased, and I look forward to the reading. That was far longer than I intended to speak. And I'm sorry about that. This is my second cup of espresso, which may have something to do with that. So very nice to see you, James, and all of you who are here. And that is far, far more than I intended, and I shall speak no more. Nice to meet you all. And Nancy, I suppose back to you.
I'm just thrilled with tonight. I cannot think of two more fabulous poets walking the earth at this moment, and you will see why. James Allen Hall's first book of poems, Now You're the Enemy, won awards from the Lambda Literary, the Texas Institute, and the Fellowship of Southern Writers. His second book, Romantic Comedy, was chosen by Diane Seuss, that's why they're paired, for the 2020 Levis Reading Prize, and is forthcoming from Four Way Books in 2023. He is a recipient of poetry fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, the Maryland State Arts Council, and the University of Arizona. He teaches at Washington College and directs the Rose O'Neill Literary House. And just a little note, when I first read James Allen Hall's Joke, ISO of a punchline in Diode, I was riveted and tracked down every poem I could find. And then I was so thrilled to learn that he lives on the eastern shore of Maryland, not too far from me, and we will certainly get together when we ever have a chance. And when he agreed to read for my Poet Laureate Poets on the Plaza reading series in honor of the LGBTQT+ National History Month, I was so thrilled to be able to introduce poetry of this caliber to my little city of Salisbury, Maryland, which is this little teeny tiny island in a sea of red. And he was a big hit. And those of you who haven't heard James read his poems are about to find out why. Welcome, James, and so good to see you again.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Thanks for organizing this and moderating this. Also, thanks to Leah, to Danny, to Zach, and most of all, thank you to Diane, who selected my book, which I toiled on for 10 years. And was actually pretty sure it would never, ever, ever see the light of day. So I still get verklempt that a poet I admire so much chose my work too. And to that end, if you all haven't gotten Diane's book, Frank, it's incredible. I read it in one sitting, and it's not a thin book. It's 135 pages or so. And it's just intense and fabulous. And anyway, thank you, Diane. I'll read 3 poems, 2 from the forthcoming book, and then 1 from my previous book. This is called Romantic Comedy. The only thing you need to know is that it's based on the movie Enchanted from 2007. Romantic comedy. Goddamn the snow that sent me into the theater for 2 hours refuge in projected light. Even if I only wanted escape, goddamn my wanting. Goddamn the romantic comedy, a genre pockmarked by selves who never fulfill themselves. Goddamn the men like me, holding hands next to me in the dark, their snippets of growl gilding the film, their delight at the comic heroine's transformation from cartoon to flesh. She falls from Technicolor to Times Square, rising from the underground in her marriage gown. Goddamn her flawless skin, her eyes rinsed red, waking in a drain pipe at the beginning of a soured century. And then, God, after the movie's over, and I've been flung into another city's sprawl, after I've been crowd filtered, released from the fold, forlorn, damn the bride emerging from the Renaissance Hotel across the salted avenue, a vision in an unsullied dress. Goddamn the fabric, so luminous in the portrait, looming from its frame, filling us with longing to bite it into shreds. Goddamn, what's wrong with me? I can't stop thinking about the fairy tale princess, her optimism a gust, perfumed wind in a flagging sail, as if no one is shipwrecked on the shores of love always fails us. The groom is whispering, "Goddamn, you're wet," in the hotel laundry to a bridesmaid whose white fur wrap is a strip of fallen weather on the cement floor. Goddamn all beauty made in betrayal. Goddamn the bride. She wants to live the heroine's life. All shivering lip and beaded veil. Goddamn her until she is weeping, the cartoon fool. The goddamn concierge opens the car door for her, bending elegantly at the waist to palm her dress into the limousine. He fingers the slight hem. Goddamn him, showing us what he could do to skin on the belly, skin on the thigh, my untouched cheek. Goddamn the wind, it isn't the hand of a lover. Goddamn the wine glass shattering inexplicably at the best man's toast. The best men, the worst men, the extras in the movie which brought me to tears. God damn them and the gift of my body. God damn the land and the air, the fish and the fowl, the light in the day and the night in the night. But do not damn the lit cigarette I'm holding too close to my face. Not it, God. Though it burns acrid between my fingers, it does not leave me alone to lift my face up out of the halo of darkness in the cold of Chicago. This next poem is about a class I took in college, where I learned about the rebel queen Boudica, who led a revolt against the Roman captivity. The poem references sexual assault and uses the F slur. So just for you to know there. This is called Early English History. Was too early. 8 a.m. Tuesday, Thursday, Elizabeth Hall. I slouched half asleep, first rode demarcated from the frat boys sitting in back so they could see up the professor's skirt. In the mead hall after, they surrounded, let me close if I shared my notes. I was in love with the black-haired outfielder, his backwards Braves cap, until he called me fag for refusing to rate our teacher's underwear. I didn't know how to fight back. I learned that semester about the rebel queen Boudica, whose revolt razed 3 Roman forts and the emperor's temple. Tacitus provides motive, her husband dead, kingdom annexed, Boudica flogged, her daughters raped. The armies she led tortured its captives, but he doesn't say why. Some pain is negligible. Its survival cancels the wound of its birth. Most accounts say she poisoned herself, facing defeat. Cassius Dio gives her longer, secreted away to the south, living unrecorded for years with her daughters. The boys in my class drew stick figures fucking on the wall by my room after I came out. I woke at night to wash out the crooked glyphs, the caption proclaiming AIDS kills fags dead. I scrubbed until what remained was fist-sized, vague, and pink, a map of the possible world. Our final project was to cook an authentic English banquet, eaten family style at the professor's house. At the appointed time in the year of our Lord, I came with dessert, but did not see the moat she'd installed in her foyer. The strawberry pudding flew like an arrow, pink spurting everywhere, especially across the faces of those boys whose names were lost the moment I joined an insurrection begun in AD 61 by a dissident queen. In the years since my disappearance, I have cemented my escarpments, foddered my cannon, sewn up my flag. I am painting my face, bluing my body with woad. Warn them, I am coming to punish my Romans. And basically, I've just read to you the first and the last poems that I wrote for that book too, I really hadn't realized that. And this poem is the title poem from my first book. That's not true at all. I think of it that way sometimes. I don't know, COVID brain. This is a fact which occurred in America. It references a painting, a really large painting that's in Houston, Texas, painted by George Daw in the early 19th century, 1810 or so. And the painting is of a Black man, an enslaved man, wrestling a buffalo, being forced to wrestle a buffalo to the ground. It's an abolitionist painting. George Daw was an abolitionist newspaper man. So this is a fact which occurred in America. The only other thing you might need to know is I grew up in Central Florida, and people tell me that that's not the South, but my 5th grade teacher said exactly what is mentioned in this poem. So I feel like it is the South, a fact which occurred in America. In the 5th grade, when we came finally to the Civil War, the teacher kept saying, "We lost, we lost." His eyes a shadowy grief under his favorite painting, a laminated Daw reproduction subtitled, "A Fact Which Occurred in America." A Black man wrestling a buffalo to the ground. The ground becomes his grave, I am the buffalo. In the painting of the buffalo, rolling his eye to size up the man who will never be strong enough to wrestle his way out of the definition of black, I'm trying to say, we are metaphors for each other. Please, don't kill me. The man is black, but so is the buffalo, so is the sky, and so is the heart, which keeps this fact holy. In the painting, I am the buffalo because I want to be loved by pure physicality, a man with broad hips and broader anger and a yoke around his neck which has not broken him yet. In the painting about a buffalo's last breath, I am the dust matted on the lips. Kiss me, keep me in your mouth. Don't let me dissolve into fact. In the painting about a boy, I am sorry we lost the Civil War 50 times on the blackboard after school in his deserted 5th grade class. I am the bone white chalk. I have always wanted to be someone's defiled good buffalo. In the painting, the man tells the buffalo, play dead. I'll get you out of this. In the defiled 5th grade teacher's laminated copy of the painting, I am the racing pulse of the boy getting his revenge when the teacher isn't looking. I am the time after we learned about the heroic Civil War on the playground, when Datrion caught me alone in the maze of trees and held me down with one hand, kissed me with his tongue, licking my lip first, smoothing it for his. My first kiss on the ground, the leaves spreading under us, black and wet. Deep in the animal wrestled down part of me, the boy was bent like a tree over a maze, scribbling a hyphenated name in tiny scrawl in black ink on a piece of paper, trying all hour during language arts to get back to the maze. When the teacher snatches up the paper, his eyes widening at the darker revolt. In the punishment, I was the black boy, my body lashed by loss and sorrow. I was the buffalo. I wanted to lose the war. I wanted to stay black. The filmy white chalk, a sickness stretched over my skin. In that America, I am always betraying the master. Thank you very much.
James, it's astounding. I was lost, completely lost in the world of your poems. Thank you so much. That was just astounding. Thank you. Gosh, our next reader is the fabulous queen, Diane Seuss. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to have her with us. She's the author of 5 poetry collections, including Still Life, The Dead Peacocks and a Girl, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize in Poetry. And Four-Legged Girl, a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Frank, Sonnets was published by Graywolf Press in 2021. She is a 2020 Guggenheim Fellow, and she was raised by a single mother in rural Michigan, which she continues to call home. And huge congratulations, Diane, on the Updike Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, which you just very recently received. Like the fangirl and love dog I am of Diane's poetry, I've been tracking her poems for quite a while. And I held my breath and took a chance and asked if she'd be the featured selection for the forthcoming Plume Poetry 9 anthology never dreaming she would really agree. Not only did she agree, but she sent me her unpublished manuscript to Frank so I could prepare for an interview. And I felt like I'd been given a backstage pass to a Lou Reed concert. Oh, I can't tell you. It's been amazing. And thank you, Diane, and welcome. And hopefully we'll be able to have a few questions after your reading, but I'm going to reserve one question that a burning question that I'll ask after you read. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody hearing me? Okay. Whoa. I'm still recovering from James reading. What an incredible group of poems, my God. So honored that I got to read and select his book, and I can't wait till it comes out. So I just want to briefly thank Danny, Lawless, editor of Plume, and Leah and Zach and everyone at the magazine for their support of my work. I'm so grateful to Nancy Mitchell for reaching out and conducting we did a fun interview that's going to be in the magazine, and for curating the sonnets that will be in there from Frank. And yes, thank you to James for agreeing to read with me, and just for the beauty and bravery of his work. I'm just emboldened and blown away. And thank you to all of you for showing up and listening. So I'm going to read for maybe 12 minutes. Hopefully that'll give us some time at the end. But this, I'm just counting how many minutes that is. Okay. This one is for Nancy. All things now remind me of what love used to be. Swollen cattails in lonely places, gluey conditioner in my hair, firm books, their variegated spines, swirl of words like a stirred cocktail, whirled umbilicus, pulsing asterisk. The past is this: to have been young and desirous, and to be those things no more. In the future, the cattails will explode without me. I pray they will not go unseen. Who will ride the cemetery horses? Incorrigible blonde forelocks blowing in their eyes. Back when I walked through cemeteries, commenting on the strange names. The present tense, to take a loveless path, is to court a purple blue emptiness, like a disco or a grotto, or the cave where dead bodies are stored in the winter when a shovel can't break through frozen ground. I have seen such spaces. I've been alone in them. Sound of water lapping, animals calling to each other, echo of my own breath, smoke pouring from my mouth in the cold. Memory, interloper in the corner who means to kill, heavy rock in its hand. And poetry, this poem right now, this one night stand. From this bench, I like to call my bench, I sit and watch my tree, which is not my tree, no one's tree, the quiet, except for barn swallows, which are not loud birds. How many exclamation points can I get away with in this life? Who was it who said only 2 or maybe 7? Bishop, Marianne Moore. Either way, the world is capable of quiet if everyone stays indoors and no jet planes. My tree, it just stands there in the middle of everything, in a meadow on the bay, looking what Bart called adorable. Then I drove the mile west to the sea, which had decided to be loud that day. The sunset, oh, ragged and bloody as a piece of raw meat in the jaws of some big carnivore. And I cried a little, for none of it will last. This is one, so this is, Frank is a book of sonnets, and they're obviously contemporary, untraditional sonnets. So they're all 14 lines, and most have some kind of rhyme going on, and a little meter, just to remind me of where I am and who I'm from. But some of them almost read like little brief nonfiction or brief memoir, flash memoir. And this is one. Freak accidents do happen. Girl said it 10, 12 times that night. Her pronouncement curled in my head for decades, a tequila worm. My sister and I snowbound in a cold house. Our mother stranded somewhere, sleeping, she said, in a public library. I pictured her under a blanket of paperbacks, power out, so we tracked each other's breath in the flashlight beam. That girl, somebody from the neighborhood, made it through the snow to play a role in our tragedy. Maybe snowshoed, wouldn't put it past her. Freak accident, she said, moving the candle to the center of the table because fire turns little girls to cinders. I was 8, my sister 12. Blizzard brought out her kinder nature. Normally, she'd have used this as a chance to murder me. We ate saltines and margarine huddled in bed. Don't choke, the freak girl said. Wind whining, power lines writhing and crackling across 13th Street. Our father shivering in his coffin under all that snow. Oh, that freckled oracle. Lizzie Ferris was her name. So that's sort of a childhood poem. Now zip forward, and this is a divorce poem. I was told once by an editor that my second book had too many divorce poems in it. So here's another one, darling. It's that time of spring when the mulch ads come. And so I remember cedar mulch that smelled like a hope chest, pine mulch, dyed the color of hair, dyed bright red. And the year my ex bought cocoa bean mulch and our lives smelled like Hershey, Pennsylvania. I guess those are the things I didn't appreciate enough. I appreciated other things, like when he remembered to pick up the baby from daycare, but I digress. I think there's still half a bag of mulch in the garage, which is damp since baby, by then a teenager, shot out the windows and a squirrel with his BB gun. And now that he's a man, he still talks about hating himself for the squirrel. That was the year after his father left. The same year, I think he was 13, he spray painted Angelina Jolie in purple on a big piece of plywood and leaned it against the stone wall, where as a toddler, he'd stuck the little glass animals that used to come in red rose tea boxes into gaps between the stones. But once his father was gone, the mulch was gone, and then heroin and meth and crack and weeds and Angelina in the garden. This is one of a sequence of poems in the book that are about travel, I guess. That delicious time when I was alone and could root around and road trip in interesting places. Remember those days? It ends with the image of a house of mirrors, which probably most of you know from carnivals. You don't know how to get out. Either all of this is an apparition or I am. And where the apparition began, I don't rightly know. Maybe I'm still coupled. Maybe I have a towhead in tow. My singularity in every circumstance, a mirage. Reading the Dubliners at Orlando's, eating a taco while the whole world sips its margaritas in tandem. Watching a meteor shower from a blue picnic table in the dark near a tributary of the Rio Grande. Wild dogs rambling through the Pueblo beneath the blood of Christ mountains, where I will never belong, nor should I. And magpies with the indigo feathers down their backs, who can recognize their own faces in looking glasses. Or Intro to Buddhism, peyote tripping through class, the prof spinning a prayer wheel like a party favor. Maybe all the way back to being trapped with my dad in a house of mirrors, reaching for a father and banging into glass, self, impairment, hallucination. So much of what comes out in poems is I don't really understand. I think that's one of the things I love about poems is the process is so mysterious that even the writer doesn't fully know what they're doing. This will be my last. The sonnet, like poverty, teaches you what you can do without. To have, as my mother says, a wish in one hand and shit in another. That was an answer to, I wish I had an Instamatic camera and a father. Wish in one hand, she said, shit in another. She still says it. When she tells me she wishes I were there to have some of her bean soup, she answers herself. Wish in one hand, she says, shit in another. Poverty, like a sonnet, is a good teacher. The kind that wraps your knuckles with a ruler, but not the kind that throws a dictionary across the room and hits you in the brain with all the words that ever were. Boxed fathers buried deep are still fathers, teacher says. Do without the, without and, without hot dogs in your baked beans. A sonnet is a mother, every word a silver dollar. Shit in one hand, she says, wish in another. Okay, that was me. Thank you. Thank you.
Diane, I love these, and it's so great that you read most of the ones that are in the anthology.
That's what I went for.
Thank you so much. It is like going to a concert. You have you've been playing the album, and then you get to go and hear it. So that was just sublime. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you listened. I assume nothing.
I wanted to ask a question because I was knocked out by the Left Bank books, reading an interview with the brilliant Jane Huffman and Diane Levin. It was a knockout, and I've shared it probably with 25 people. And honest to God, they felt a major shift in their perception of poetry. These are some of the things that they were saying. I was transfixed. She writes the fullest poems I know. Who will ride the cemetery horses? She said, just to trust that image. How brave. And I know from our interview, which you all have to get this anthology because of all the fabulous poems and this interview, we talked about that. And I know you didn't write these poems with the intention of becoming the guru of unvarnished or to be courageous, but in many ways you have become that since the book came out. And I'm wondering if you're astounded by the reception Frank has received. And, you know, it's, I don't know, I think about, it's kind of like this small cult following. And I'm just wondering, I think about Bob Dylan, who said, hey man, I have nothing to do with this. I just wrote these songs and sang them. So, you know, we talked about intimacy, and your poems are intimate, but they're not, they don't seduce the reader in the way some other poems do. I think there's all this juxtaposition of the ordinary and extraordinary, and it's kind of like tracking the mind, and you allow us. So I know that's a really big and loaded question, but if you wanted to just talk about
dive in. Well, thank you. Thank you for your kind and wonderful comments, and for, you know, supporting my work. And believe me, you know, I'm in this house, and I've been in this house for over a year by myself. And so it's heartening just to see your faces in the screen, but also to realize that people are reading the book. And so I think, especially, I'm not sure I ever fully feel, you know, I'm not sure any writer, James probably feels this way too, is totally aware of how their work lands or if anybody's reading it. You know, poetry is down the list often in people's priorities, sadly. But you know, especially with the pandemic, everything is muffled. I'm not sure what's happening with the book, really. So when I hear something like what you just said, or when I realize people are reading it, or that it's having an impact, it really is, it's lifeblood to me right now. And not in the sort of, you know, geez, I'm poetry famous, which isn't famous, but not in that sense at all, but in the sense that I've had several people say, reading this and your subject matter helps me feel that my subject matter is possible, or my subject matter is as legitimate as anybody else's. Being from the rural, being from the Midwest, being the age I am, shall we reveal it? 64. I think, you know, it's very unlikely in a lot of ways to be heard and in this way. And so I hope that other people, I mean, my first book didn't come out until I was 40. I hadn't even tried to publish. So it's okay to not be 25 with an MFA, you know, with the first book. It's okay to work in your own timeline. It's okay, and it's valuable to write from your own location, your own landscape, your own people. And really, that's who my books have really been about bringing my people into the conversation. And so whoever your people are, they deserve a seat at the table. I think of Langston Hughes' I Too Sing America. You know, that too, I always have loved that word. I too, you know, not just you, Mr. Whitman, but, you know, and that's why I love putting my mom, putting the last poem I read, you know, her idiom, shit in one hand, wish in another, or reverse, into a poem that, you know, you could say is about aesthetics. So bringing together the collision of what people call the low-down culture and so-called high culture or high art really has probably been my deepest mission as a writer. So that's all to say, to know that people have Frank, are reading it, makes me feel like, you know, my own life, my own stories, the people who are in the book who are no longer, as my mother says, no longer on this side of the grass, have a part to play and are valued and are valuable. That feels really good.
Diane, I hope I'm your people. I am your people. And you know, 66 years old, you are a goddess. I mean, the rest of us that are older, it's like, damn, you know, you're an inspiration. And that doesn't even begin to cover it. I know, you know, you're just a force of nature is what and we need. I mean, it's just like, wow, this came out. And it's, I mean, people that don't even read poetry, I sent it to them. They said, I don't even know what poetry is anymore. And that's how I feel hearing both James' poems and your poems. It's like, wow, it's just a revelation.
Well, the two of us have decided to take over the world.
Yay! I'm down with that. Does anybody have maybe one more question? I think we have time for that. Is anybody, if you want to?
Cecilia asked to both of us if it's hard to be so vulnerable in the poems, or is it liberating? Can James take that on?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I mean, I in the world, and you make a choice, right? And I've never, I mean, as a queer person, you know, I feel the threat in the world, and so I feel vulnerable, you know. And you know, it's poems like Diane writes that make me feel like the bullshit gets cleared away, you know. And the world gets like established, and there's beauty. And so yeah, I just choose to stand in front of that, you know, instead of, I guess, cowering is the other choice. I don't think
Yes.
there's another, right?
I think so. Yeah. I feel like I wasn't it Bell Hooks who wrote, you know, rather than trying to like get into the center, let the center move to you. And I think if, you know, as James was saying, vulnerability isn't just about your own sort of intimate tenderness, but also your very life, your very safety as anybody in this country who isn't straight, white, and male. So anything we can do to extend our voices and make, I always feel like make a little fire outside the boundary of all that shit and allow those who can to make their way to us and to find a new center. So writing isn't just on our own behalf, but it's to build that new center. But yeah, I don't, there's something kind of cold in me that when I'm actually working on the poem, I don't feel particularly vulnerable, because all of those questions about language and, making it right come into play. And with the sonnet, just having that form kind of kept me on track and kept it almost did feel like a shield. So it's more when you read out loud or when people ask you about your work that you're aware, like, oh God, in Frank, I talk about a lot of really intimate stuff. But I've always done that. So, what's the choice to not do that? I like a world where we all throw it out there. Yeah.
Diane, I thank you so much for giving us that image of the fire, because I was kind of grasping for an image. It's almost like I see this hobo fire out, from the outskirts of town,
Yeah, exactly what I see by the tracks,
by the tracks. And it's
and
like,
that's how I always thought of teaching, like I was on the outskirts of the so-called academy. I didn't want to be in the middle. And on the outskirts, then the students, you come to me, we'll make a fire. We'll eat beans out of a can.
no, that's man. Okay, you're the fire. That's it. Danny, do you want to say a few words? And I think we're going to have to close out, darn it. But
Yeah.
would you like to say something, Danny, just to wrap it up?
Oh, only to say, can you hear me? Yes. Generally, I'm not so much on poetry readings. I prefer things to come to me on the page, but I have to say, I think you've changed my mind. James and Diane, this was the best reading I've been to in many, many years.
Thank you.
Just astounding. The work itself will grow more powerful for me when I see it on the page more. But this, thank you.